This is the Working Writer Podcast, episode 45. Hey, we're back for another episode of the Working Writer Podcast. You know the deal by now. If you're a writer and you're looking for a little inspiration, perhaps some motivation, you're in the right place. I am your incredibly happy host and Indiana University fan, Brad Staggs, along with producer Dave Bunnell, who is also just as happy taking care of your video and sound over there. Just for transparency, just want everybody to know, we are filming this episode the day after Indiana University, the Hoosiers, won the National College Football Championship for the first time in school history. So I'm a little sleep-deprived and ecstatic at the same time. I know you got to watch it earlier out there in California, but you did get to watch at least the last half of the game, right, Dave?
Yeah, I did. It was fantastic. And like most Indiana teams in sports, it gave me a heart attack.
Yes.
Yes. I swear, as it was going, I go, they're going to find a way to lose by 1 point. They're going to do it.
I was apoplectic. The wife was just watching me because I just on the edge of the couch the entire time, and I loved that it was a great game, but I hate that it was that close.
It was a good game, which I liked, but it was, it was getting to the point where you're like, oh, come on, guys, please don't fumble this. It's like, is this going to be the biggest what if story, or is it actually going to? But it happened, and it was a really good feeling to have that championship because now they are, I believe, one of the only teams ever to have an undefeated basketball championship and an undefeated football championship.
Only college to be undefeated in both basketball and football, and it's happened within my lifetime. So, and I watched both games, so I'm very, very happy. So congratulations to our Indiana Hoosiers, who are all watching this, just in case you're wondering. They're all watching this, and they're very happy about it.
And since you're watching it, and we know how much money you guys are willing to throw at things, we would love to get a sponsor.
So, Mark Cuban, I will sell you 50% of this podcast for a valuation of at least $1,000. I mean, I think that's a good valuation.
I think it's a good deal.
Yeah, that'll work. So that'd be $250 for each of us, I guess.
But yeah, it's funny. We're talking about college and stuff. Our guest we're actually having this week, I worked with at a university.
Oh, down at U of E.
Yeah, we actually worked together at the University of Evansville, and we had worked on a few films. And he's gone on to do more things, and he's a super talented writer, talented director. But Joe Atkinson is one of my favorite people to work with.
So you were both Purple Aces.
We were Purple Aces. He worked in the communications and was teaching video production, and I would come in and tell him, kind of give him a little tips here and there, because he kind of fell into the video world of teaching it. And so we worked really well together. I worked with him for about 4 years before I moved to New York City. So I love Joe. He's a great guy. He has a brand new film out that it's called Wet Balm Temperature that I'm sure we're going to talk about. And he's really come a long way. I'm really impressed with what he's doing.
Wet Bulb Temperature, I watched it this morning, as a matter of fact, and I was very impressed by the writing. It looks great, and I'm hoping it will be in some places where people can see it soon, because I think it's a good piece of art. So why don't we go ahead and get talking to Joe Atkinson. Hey, we're very lucky to be joined in this week's episode by a man whose resume reads like he's been training to write for his entire life for every occasion. From a science and journalism from Ohio University to a Master of Fine Arts in Writing from the University of Nebraska, Omaha, with a stopover at the University of Evansville to get his master's in Public Service Administration, Joe Atkinson has been a journalist, teacher, filmmaker, writer, and is quickly becoming an Evansville institution here in Southern Indiana. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you the one and only Joe Atkinson.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for having me. That is a better introduction than I deserve, and thank you for that. I cannot live up to that.
I can introduce people. I just can't talk afterward. And, you've got all the degrees, so I am feeling a little bit like, I'm going to have to step up my English game here.
Oh, that's not going to be the case at all. I'm married to an English teacher. I'm the second best speaker in my own house. So.
being married to an English teacher, yes, I am as well. And I'm married to an English teacher who's also an editor. So I get it. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
from
Okay.
both
Well, let's
sides.
let's just make a pact that we're not going to correct each other too much on here. We're just going to let whatever happens happen, and we're going to move on. Just let it ride. Let it ride.
I like that. I like that.
Yes.
Well, let's start this off with a friendly little question that I've been aching to ask you because I watched your incredible film. Your I'll call it post-apocalyptic, even though it's a beautiful film. It leaves you to decide for yourself what's going on. And I loved it. A film called Wet Bulb Temperature.
Thank you.
I watched that, and there's something I've been dying to ask you because I love a good conspiracy theory. Is there something going on in Evansville, Indiana that we need to know about that you're not telling us? Because
No, there is not.
you're a documentarian, and I
Yes.
firmly believe that this is a documentary you made, and then somebody said, we really need to call this a fictional film. So is there
I'm going to
something
take that
that
as
we
a
need to
compliment.
know about?
I'm going to take that as a compliment. I like that it felt that realistic to you. Unfortunately, or very fortunately, no, that is not. There's nothing in the water in Evansville. There's nothing happening here that is that is leading that way. Just that was a film that I wrote after spending some time I taught at Harlexton College, which is the British campus of the University of Evansville. I taught a semester there, and when you're there, you're very close with the students all the time. We have meals together, and you live in the same building and all of that. And I just one of the things that sort of seeped in was that existential climate dread of what that future was going to look like. And so while I was working on my MFA in screenwriting, I had to produce these workshop pieces, just, some pages that I would bring in that everybody would workshop, and then I would spend the rest of the semester trying to finish that script. And that was one I just decided I was going to take a couple of days and vomit the first 18 pages of it. And it looks very different. That original 18 pages look very different. But the gist of the idea of these three college students who are living together and living in the beginning of this apocalyptic time, that was there. And, I took it into workshop and expected them to just absolutely kill me on it. And they did. I mean, deservedly so. It was very rough, which was on purpose, I think. But they, along with doing that, though, they gave me some kind of wow, this is really interesting, and this is really interesting. And I thought about some things in ways that maybe I wouldn't have without those others being brought in to have that conversation. And so, yeah, that's kind of where that script came from, and the genesis of what I'm happy to say feels like a documentary, and I'm also very happy to say is not a documentary.
Well, we'll let the lie sit right
Just
there.
let it ride.
That
Just let it ride.
You're
Just
saying
let it
that
ride.
it's not a documentary. Okay.
Just let it go.
Now, when you're writing your vomit draft, when you're
Right,
trying
yes.
to get stuff out on paper, do you find that to workshop it is the easiest way for you to get to the next draft, or was that something that was new to you?
No, I think it was new to me at that time to some extent, because that was my second semester in grad school. The first semester, it was a low residency program, so every semester we had a residency where you had to go for 10 days up to Omaha. A really, really great experience. Except I did it during COVID, so there was a lot of Zoom involved during part of it too. But you
That's
had
the best way to see Omaha is through Zoom.
I saw it through Zoom, and now I've seen it in person a couple times. I actually went back recently as an alumni speaker, which was a fantastic experience. But the first semester that I did it, I brought something that was really polished, that I had been working on for a long time. And because I wanted to impress everybody, right? I wanted everybody to be like, wow, what a good writer this guy is. And I took very little from that workshop. It just wasn't useful because I got defensive because it was so polished, and it was so, you had that writer thing where you're too close to it, and I wasn't able to take good feedback until much, much later. I still don't have a draft of that script that I like, by the way. But so I decided for the second one, I'm just going to puke something out, and we're just going to see what happens. And I've since found that to be the best way for me to do it, is that if I just kind of write that word vomit, and then, either I'll go back and look at it, or I'll get some feedback from other people. I usually try and do 1.5 drafts before I show it to everybody. The first draft is just, get to the end and don't worry about, I'm doing this thing on page 100 that I need to go back to page 30 and set it up. And so it works. Don't worry about that in the first draft. Draft 1.5 is fixing those things. It's just finding those things where it's okay, let's go back to page 30 and let's set up that thing that's going to happen on page 100. After I have that and there's at least consistency in the script, that's when I like at that point to go out and get feedback from other people, because whether I always used to tell my students, if you get 100 ideas from the class and 97 of them are terrible, then that's 3 things that made your script better. So I want to go see what they're going to have to say. And again, there's that discretion of knowing, like, okay, that's an interesting note. I'm not going to use it, but that's an interesting note. Versus, oh, wow, I'm really glad somebody brought that up because I hadn't thought about that. I had that recently with a stage draft where somebody was like, what if you did this in Act 1? I was like, yep, that's what's been missing.
Now, that's when you had kind of a captured audience having a class. You're not teaching now. Now, I know you
Nope.
you get together weekly with other filmmakers like Jake Belinsky and you go through things.
Sure.
But how do you find other people that you can trust to look at one of your drafts and not just blow smoke at you and go, this is fantastic, I love this or I love that, and actually give you good editing suggestions?
Absolutely, because that is a real issue, is finding those people that will have the time and will take the time, because reading a script is, it takes time. And so that's one piece of it. And the other is, you're right, there's a lot of people that will either don't know any better than to blow smoke or just don't want to offend you or whatever.
Right.
Jake is very good about that. He will not feed me any crap, which is terrific. But I also have stayed in touch with some people that I went to grad school with who I respect tremendously as writers and who are really, really good with feedback. So one of our professors and then 4 of us who graduated together all still workshop things with each other at times. We'll send each other drafts and talk through it. And again, I think when you find other writers who are really serious about this, they know that giving you that blowing smoke feedback doesn't help. It doesn't do good. Like, right? When you have the script done and you've locked it and you're going to film it, that's when we talk about how good it is. But before that, it doesn't do you any good to talk about what's working. To say this is working, don't change it is useful. But it doesn't do good to dwell on the things that are working. It does good to dwell on the things that are not working, so that you can figure out a way to fix them. And again, you're not going to agree with everybody. And there may be things that you say, I hear what you're saying, but I don't agree with that and I don't want to go there. But yeah, just having that group from grad school has been priceless to me. The other thing that I've started doing is trying to get, for my last stage play, we just did a workshop reading. So the theater here, the Civic Theater, we actually did, got actors up on stage with microphones in front of them, and they read the script in character, and we invited the public to come out. And again, it was one of those things where I got a lot of notes. I got a lot of notes that I won't use, but I also got, a half dozen to a dozen that I absolutely will use. And it also helps just to hear it out loud yourself, to be able to be like, oh, that's going really too slow. That's taking too long. That line didn't work. That didn't get a laugh that I thought it might. So just to be able to kind of recognize that in those spaces is also really helpful.
How do you feel about table read with no audience versus having a staged reading with an audience? What's the difference there give to you, especially when you're talking theater? Because that's my background, is coming from theater.
Yeah, to me, the difference between those two is how ready I think the script is.
Mm-hmm.
I would want to do a table read first almost always, because that to me is that kind of closed circuit is, okay, we know this is not ready yet. Like, we know this is definitely not ready, but it still gives you that chance to hear it out loud. It gives you that chance to recognize where the pacing isn't working, or where, a plot element isn't working, or a character is inconsistent, or whatever. You hear it in a way that you don't when you're reading it on the page. So I do think that that's tremendously helpful. To me, the step after that is workshop, where you actually have an audience or somebody there who can add additional notes, because at that point, not only are you hearing what's working and what's not working, you're also hearing what the audience is reacting to. Because, you may think, okay, that line is hilarious, it's going to be great, and the audience is stone silent, or vice versa. There were, numerous times in this last reading where I thought, it's a little funny, but it's not. And the whole first act, they're laughing the whole way through it. And I'm like, this is funnier than I realized. Do I want to lean into that? Am I okay with that? So that, I think, once you get to the point where that you're like, this is close, that to me is when I want to get that audience reaction and find out where they're coming from and what's reading for them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, again, just hearing that reaction is even more valuable than the feedback that comes from it. Not every time, but sometimes just hearing the actual live reaction is as beneficial or more so than any feedback that comes from the reading and the experience.
Yeah, I've found the last play I did, I had a gag in there that the basis of the gag was Samson was the funniest person ever because he always brought the house down. And I thought that was a funny gag because I'd been brought up on the story of Samson and Delilah and how that story ended. I had people ask me what that was about, because there are many more people who don't know that story now than I ever thought. And the gag is based on you knowing the story.
Right. Yeah.
And I wouldn't have known that without a table read, because it shocked me that there were people who didn't know the basic
Right.
story of Samson and Delilah. So I think
And
a table read is almost mandatory just to work out those kind of little bugs.
yeah, you get a lot of
inside
those.
that script.
Yeah, you get a lot of those questions where people don't get the reference or don't recognize the. Completely agreed.
When you're writing a script, whether it be theater, whether it be film, do you find that you have somebody's voice in your head when you're writing characters, or can you separate a voice from the character?
Generally, I think I generally can separate a voice from the character. I can't think of many instances where I've written with somebody specific in mind. It's happened before.
Mm-hmm.
But I think especially now that I have a little more, a few more scripts under my belt, I don't think that I do that as much as I used to. I think now the thing that I'm trying to do with the voices is be just consistent with it. And that first draft, it's never going to be right. It's always gonna be inconsistent, and to some extent, the character does what you need them to do in the script, because you're gonna go back and iron that out later and be like, okay, I see what I'm doing there, but she never would have said that, or he never would have done that. Like, that's not consistent with everything I've done with them before now. So yeah, no, I don't think that at this point I write with somebody in mind. There have been times, like when I did Wet Bulb, I met Bev Buchanan, who played Delia.
Mm-hmm.
I met her. She was in one of my classes, actually, while I was a couple of drafts into it. And we got to talking after class, and she was a theater student. And at some point, she asked to read the script, and I let her read it and told her, I think I'm going to try and make this as my next film. And she's like, cool, I'm Delia. And I was like, yeah, I think you are. I think you are. Yeah, and I don't remember exactly what that timeline was or anything along those lines, but I do remember that after that, in later drafts, I started to kind of see her in that role. But really, for me, that character was always dominated by Cara Davidson's voice. And Cara played Charlene, one of the adult characters in Wet Bulb. But she was one of my grad school classmates, and she's one of those people who I still send scripts to and still stay in touch with. And I always heard Cara's voice after the first workshop reading, not the first one, but the first time that I had a full act. We did another workshop reading in the middle of the semester. Cara basically said, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt because I know you're going to make this woman a better character than she is right now. Because right now the woman is the weakest character, and I know you're gonna. But I kept hearing that voice in my head. I'm like, I better fix this, or I'm gonna hear. I'm gonna hear from Cara. I'm gonna hear from Cara. And I think that to some extent, especially when I was younger, I definitely struggled writing women.
Yeah.
At that point, and I think I'm better at it now. I mean, a lot of my protagonists and main characters at this point are women. I don't know when that switched or how that happened. At some point, so you stop writing about yourself. You stop writing about people in their 20s because you realize I'm 46 and that's ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, that was a struggle for me. And I think I recognized it a little bit going into that. But once Cara said that, I was like, I really need to do better at this. Like, I really, this character's not registering right now. And I'm really proud of that character now. And I'm really proud of Bev's performance in that role.
So what do you do to get better at writing female characters, or characters that, let's be honest, aren't ourselves, don't have our experiences, et cetera, and so on? Did you actually sit down and talk to people like Cara, or did you study and just change it?
I couldn't tell you what I did. I don't think there was anything conscious about it other than realizing that, all of the characters have to be on their own journey, right? I mean, everybody's the hero of their own story, and everybody has to. And so for me, it really just became more about being better at understanding what that character's goals are, and being better at understanding what that character's backstory is. And in that case, and I think that also applies to all of the characters. That's not just the female characters. That's every character, like you said, who isn't myself, right? Because there's going to be a piece of yourself in almost everybody that you write. I mean, if you watch Wet Bulb, there's a little bit of me and Eric. There's a little bit of me in and there's a little bit of me in Delia. There's a little bit of me in all of these characters. Maybe not Mark. I hope not Mark, but probably. I mean, let's be honest, right? Like, there's probably a little bit of that in there. But yeah, so I think it really became for me about making sure that they're differentiated and that they're very clear. That Eric has this particular kind of personality, and this is what's happened to him to make him this way. Owen has this personality, and this is the journey that he's on, and this is the journey that Delia's on. And I know I'm probably not saying anything groundbreaking there or anything along those lines, but that has been the thing for me is making sure that usually there's a draft for each character where I go through and I say, okay, this is a Delia draft. I'm going to go through and I'm going to make sure that all of her interactions feel true to the relationship she has with the person she's interacting with. I'm going to go and try and make sure that everything that she does feels true to what I've established that she is and what her life experience is. And I'm just going to try and make sure her voice is consistent throughout. And then I'll go back and do that again with Owen, or I'll go back and do that again with Eric, and just make sure that all of them have a draft, so that by the end, all of those characters feel consistent within themselves and within their relationships with the people around them.
And see, I really like that idea of now, mind you, for the people who haven't seen it, it is a small cast.
It is.
Obviously. But I love the idea of each character having its own draft. Because we get so stuck on, let's just get the draft done. We know who the antagonist is. We know who the protagonist is. And there are some other characters too. But I love the idea of each one having their own drafts, so that they have their own story to go through. And you as a writer, that makes you actually have to concentrate on each of those characters and make sure that they are individual characters and not just a cardboard cutout sitting in the background for the main character.
Right.
I really like that.
Those characters will stick out immediately. The ones that don't have that flesh. I try to, and I'm not always as good about this as I should be, but I do always try to, before I start writing, or at some point before a second draft, sit down and just write a character's backstory, just a free write of, a page that is, this is where they came from, this is how they got to the point where the story starts, and try and do that for each one of them. And when people talk to me about doing that before, I always thought, well, I mean, that feels like a lot of work on the front end and all that, but it's amazing how much those things that never get in the script, right, that are never going to be used, you're never going to openly refer to them or anything like that, but just having that in your mind, it's amazing how much that shapes that character and the way they say things and the way they experience things in the script, because you have in your mind, no, they wouldn't do that because their mom did this to them when they were 12 years old.
Now, as the writer, you also directed this. Where does that come in for your direction? Do you actually go through with your actors that background, or do you let them discover their own background if they want to for each of these characters?
I think it's kind of in this case, it was sort of a mix of the two. I think all of them sort of came in with some idea after reading the script. Generally, I think most of them at some point actually came to me and asked me, what kind of backstory do you see with this character? Where do you see them? And I think what you saw in there was a mix of me giving them some ideas that I had beforehand, and them coming in with some preconceived notions. And they brought some things to it that I might not have seen too. I mean, I feel like there's, for example, there is an undercurrent between Delia and Eric, especially in the back half of the film, that, it's not quite romantic, it's not quite sexual tension, it's not quite, but it flirts with that. It leans right up against it. And that happened on set. That wasn't in the script. That wasn't in the way that I directed it. I saw them as two very close friends, but I started to feel that between the two of them, and they're good friends in real life, the two actors were. And they kind of brought that into it. And initially I was like, do I like this? Do I not like this? And I decided that I did, so we ran with it. But some of it was, again, they brought those things with them, that they had kind of these ideas, and sometimes they played out really, really well.
Now that you're on the back end of it, because that was shot in 2024, right?
That was actually finished shot at the end of 2023. So, yeah,
Okay.
so yeah.
Now that you're on the back end of it and it's done, of course, you're always editing in your mind, no matter how long it's been.
Oh, I put that down a long time ago. I put that one down a long time ago.
Do you now believe that as the writer, you should have directed your own movie, or would it have been better to find somebody that you could have gotten to direct for you?
No, absolutely. I'm glad I directed that one. I would not change that decision. I'm really pretty opinionated. And a little bit of a control freak.
A little bit.
I'm a little bit of a control freak, yeah. So I've always joked, directing is my least favorite part of the process. I really like writing. I really like editing, because that to me is also storytelling. I mean, just in the same way that the writing is storytelling, the editing is taking the visuals and using them to tell that story, that you're kind of rewriting the story with the visuals. So I love those two parts. Those are my favorite parts. And I've always joked that if I could hand a script to somebody and have them deliver the footage to me looking exactly the way that I want it to, so that I could edit it, that's what I would do. But the problem is there's no way to make that happen. So I actually have to direct it. So yeah, no, I was really lucky to work with Jake Belinsky, who is a terrific cinematographer and was really good at, sort of translating what I saw in my head and making it a little bit better on film. He did a really nice job with that. So I was lucky to have him to work with. He's himself a very good director. So having him to bounce ideas off and to work with was tremendously helpful. But no, I don't think there's any universe in which I would have wanted to hand it off and have somebody else direct it. And I'm doing the same thing probably again with my next film. I'm near the end of what I think will probably be the shooting script, and starting to think about scheduling and all of that stuff to do it again. And I will absolutely direct this one too.
What genre is your next one going to be in?
How do you? It's sort of a political thriller,
Oh.
but also a little bit of that sort of, I wouldn't say this was not really post-apocalyptic, but it does have a dystopian political thriller feel to it.
Anymore, when you say political thriller, that almost becomes dystopian just by its very
Just
right?
by very nature, right? Yeah, this one, it's going to be interesting. It's a two-hander,
Mm-hmm.
and in a single location. So it's really just two characters in one spot for the length of the film. So I think there's going to be a challenge in visually keeping that engaging. I think that the script is to the point where that it's where it needs to be to keep it engaging, and I think the actors can do it. It's just a matter of, can I do it visually? Can I keep that visually engaging? So I'm looking forward to that challenge.
When we're talking about writing and the differences in writing, what do you like better? Do you like playwriting or do you like film script writing better as far as the process that you have to go through?
I don't know that I would differentiate them a tremendous amount in that way. I think that I approach both of them in a very similar way. And then the step that it has to go into the playwriting is going in and deleting all of that stage direction and action that I put in there, because when I'm doing a film, I'm usually writing it to direct it myself. Right. So all of that sort of extraneous, like, pointing out what the motivation is here, or what this silence means, or anything like that, or what's happening there, like, that's all fine, because I'm not submitting it to somebody, I'm not asking somebody else to do it. I'm going to shoot this. I can put whatever the hell I want in there, right? But in stage directions, or in a stage play, I tend to over direct as a writer. There's always another draft in that stage writing that is specifically me going back and just taking a meat axe to the stage directions and cutting. So I think that's the biggest difference for me is that I have to do that extra draft on stage. But I also think that the thing with writing for stage for me is that some of the ideas that I have that I can't make like the last stage play that I wrote, I could not write a film version of that was the same as the stage version, because it would have been too big. There are so many things that would happen off stage that on film you feel like you have to go show that. Right. I have to show what's happening in the basement. I have to show what's happening outside. I have to show when she goes to this other location. Whereas on stage, I can set the entire thing in the kitchen of the house. And when somebody goes downstairs, they're just off stage. When somebody goes outside, they're just off stage. And I don't feel like I need to show that. And so that's where stage writing has become useful to me to some extent, and become really interesting, is that what's that story that I'm never going to have the budget to film because it would be too big? Okay, can I condense that down to its sort of core essence and set it in 2 or 3 locations and put it on stage where I don't have to have that giant budget and I don't have to have that? So that's been an interesting exercise that I've found myself doing when I start writing for stage.
Right. I really believe stage writing makes you edit yourself a lot more.
Oh, yes.
It makes you realize what the actual essence of the story is, and take out, like you said, all of the extraneous stuff that really doesn't move the story forward and doesn't matter in the long run.
Right.
That's just eye candy.
The audience might expect to see it if you put it on film because it is somewhat relevant and that sort of thing. But you're right. Is it really important? Probably not. And if it's not, you can get it out. If it is, you find a way to get it into that space, right? You find a way to get it into that location. I am working on a novel right now because I had an idea that was so big that I couldn't do anything else with it. So I've got that happening right now. I'm about 60,000 words into a first draft of a novel, which is a whole other thing.
Okay, you can just stop with the "I can write anything in the world" thing. We got it.
I didn't say it was good. I did not say it was good. I said I'm taking a swing.
But that is a great lesson for the beginning writers who are listening, and this is to motivate you to write, to get that writing down. Just remember that a stage play is not a film, and vice versa.
Right.
A film can show a stage play if it's engaging enough, and it can be done. I really believe that in certain circumstances, Wet Bulb Temperature could actually be a stage play.
First draft was.
There you go. Yeah. So a stage play can be a film, but a film 99% of the time cannot be a stage play without a lot of editing.
Absolutely.
It's been done, but a lot of editing, and that would take a lot of money to put it on stage as well.
Yes, it would.
So if you're going to start writing stage plays versus films, please take a look at both of those kind of scripts and realize what that difference is. Because a film or even a television pilot, several scenes, different locations, you don't get that in a stage play, especially if you're going to work with local civic productions. We're
Right.
not talking Broadway money here. We're talking
Budgets.
civic productions. Yeah. You're lucky if you get enough money to pay for the makeup for the production
Right.
most of the time.
One of the things that I find challenging about stage plays and that I love about writing them is that you always have to do longer scenes, right? I mean, that entrance and exit is important and they matter, whereas in a film you just cut out. Here I've got that's actually my favorite sequence in Wet Bulb, and probably nobody listening to this has seen it, so that's but the third chapter of the film starts with 4 characters playing cards at the kitchen table and ends in violence.
Mm-hmm.
And for roughly 27 minutes, I believe it is, all of that unfolds in real time. There's no cuts to one place or another. It's just, it's almost like a one-act play.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really proud of the writing in that. And I don't even know that I realized that was what that scene was until I was watching it after the edit was done. And I was like, I kind of did a one-act play there, because it's just, this character leaves and this character comes in, and then this character leaves and these 2 characters come in, but we never stop the flow in this space. And so it almost does feel like a play. And that was what made me go, maybe I should write a play.
Because of the long shots, and for those who will see it in the future, I hope, there are a lot of just oneers, a lot of long shots in the film. How much rehearsal time was required before you even rolled camera on them?
Not enough. I mean, we got there. The opening scene in particular was a bit of a mess when we first tried to shoot it, and we actually had to build a second day and to reshoot that because we got it. But when we went back and watched it, we weren't happy with it. We got to about 5-6 minutes in, and Jake he's like, I'm already on Prime trying to find something else to watch. Because those sequences, I mean, not only do you need all of the actors to be on their marks and on their lines and everything else, but you also have a camera that needs to be on its marks at all times. And then you have other people in the background who are possibly shifting lighting or, changing because the power goes on and off a couple of times and that sort of thing in the scene. So there's a whole run of takes where you catch me on camera, like running away from trying to turn off a light or something like that. So yeah, I mean, we struggled with that one, and I wish we'd had a little more time. And when we went back and did it, we did rehearse more before we got in there. And I'm really happy with the takes right now. The actors got so comfortable with the dialogue, they started riffing, which made it feel more real. And, I feel like everything about it ended up clicking. But also we went from a 15-minute scene after we shot it the first time to 11 minutes and 59 seconds is what that shot is now. And there is a huge difference in 3 minutes in a scene like that.
Absolutely.
But it's 15 pages of dialogue in 11 minutes and 59 seconds without a cut.
And as an actor, that would scare the holy hell out of me.
And it should.
Yeah.
And it should. But the thing was, I think we shot that first. That was the first thing we shot on the very first day. And I think what ended up happening, and I can say this for me, I can't speak for everybody else, but I can say this for me. I went to bed that night thinking, oh my God, I should not be directing this film. Why are these people trusting me? Why are they letting me do anything? I've ruined this whole thing. And the next day I showed up and I had my A game because I was like, I am not going to let that happen again.
And I hope you got a discount on the candles.
But we had a lot of candles. We did not get a discount on the candles. We had a lot of candles.
I gotta throw this out because I was listening to it and I was thinking to myself, man, I wish I would have been on set for that, because as soon as you said, yeah, we're running around trying to turn off lights, I'm like, why did you get smart bulbs and control them from a controller?
Because it was because we didn't have the ability to do that with that set, unfortunately, because a lot of that came prepackaged, and because I didn't think of it. So thanks, Dave. I wish you could be there.
My studio is smart. Like I run everything from my tablet, so I can turn on the power. I can do everything.
Yeah.
I'm into that automation kick right now.
Yep.
Just thinking to myself, but I was like, wait a minute. I know for a fact Jake has one because I got him one.
Yeah.
Just smart bulbs. They're going.
Now we just needed we just would have needed smart flames for the candles. That would have been the other piece.
I'm old. Even my watch isn't smart.
Well, but the shot that was the one that took the longest. The other one the one that I liked the most though, and it was funny because Jake and I kind of went back and forth on it, and he wasn't he never liked it until he saw it at the end, and it wasn't because he thought it was a bad shot. It was just he wasn't happy with how he executed it. And then he saw it in the final film and he's like, okay, that was better than I realized. Is the one right at the end of the second chapter. This starts with Mark coming outside and realizing there are things missing, and ends with him, Delia coming out, and action happens in between, some on camera, some off. I love that shot. It is one of my favorite things. That took us about 10 tries to get it to where Jake was happy with it. But yeah, I mean, that one we didn't rehearse at all. We just kind of figured it out as we went. I mean, I knew what I wanted. I knew what I wanted it to look like approximately. Jake added the spin around at the beginning, which I think really, really made it pop. Yeah, so those oneers do take a lot of rehearsal. And I wish we had more time to do that. But again, when you're working on a micro budget, you do what you can.
But you had good food on set, right?
We did.
There you go.
We had good food on set, and we had coffee. We had great coffee on set. There's a local coffee shop, Honeymoon Coffee, that actually every morning gave us a picture of it. And if I texted the owner, he would send somebody up, or we could send somebody down and get another picture of it. So there's actually one day where you can tell when the coffee showed up, because the takes are useless, and then all of a sudden they're good.
As I always tell beginning filmmakers, it doesn't matter what your budget is as long as you have good food and caffeine.
Yep. We had good food and we had caffeine. So, we actually had a great crew, really great cast. I mean, everybody was so good to work with. It turned into kind of like a family environment by the end of the shoot, which is that's the best you can hope for. So
now, as directing your own writing, as a guy who directs your own writing, how are you with actors ad-libbing, improvising on what you've written?
Sure. Yeah, I'm generally okay with it as long as we hit the beats. I mean, there are certain lines that I'm like, that one might be sacred, but for the most part, I try and be flexible with it. I mean, that opening sequence, they got to the point where they were riffing on the dialogue, and they were like, do you mind if we riffed? It was like, that's going to make it feel more real. It's going to make it feel more lived in. But do me a favor, make sure you hit the beats. As long as you hit all the key points and you hit the key beats, and like that line has to be perfect. That line has to be perfect. Other than that, sure, play around. And that's kind of how I try and be with it.
So would you say with film writing especially, yes, hit the beats, but don't make every syllable a sacred cow?
That is the way that I approach it. And I know there are others who aren't. There are others who every syllable is a sacred cow, and I respect that too. But I think that, there are times that an actor would come up to me and say, I just don't feel like when I speak, this doesn't roll out right for me. Like, It's going to sound awkward no matter what. Can I say it like this instead?
Right.
And it's like, yep, yeah, okay, let's try it and see if it works. And they would do it. I go, yep, that's better. You're right, because it did feel awkward before, and now it feels right. The other thing is, and I think this is true of stage and film both, the advantage and disadvantage of being the writer and being there on set as the director is that I know what I meant when I wrote that line.
Right.
And there are times where you have to kind of say, I'm not sure you know what that line, this is what I meant. And usually they found it helpful. Usually, they would be like, oh, okay, now that line makes sense to me, because the emphasis they're putting it here and it needs to be over here.
Exactly.
So, yeah, being able to say, this is what I meant when I said the line. Oh, that's what the line means. Okay, cool, I got you. And I needed to be, I think there were moments where early in the shoot, I wasn't quite comfortable enough to just step up and say that.
Sure.
And I wish that I had been, because by the end of the shoot, we were all pretty close. So I could just be like, dude, that's not what that line means. That's what that line means. Oh, okay, cool. I'll change it.
Or even just the amount of sarcasm or the amount of surprise on a single word or a single line.
Right.
Can make a whole difference too.
Right. And I try not to ever say it like this. I don't want to give you a line reading, but I do, it'll be more like, this is your motivation here. Like, this is why you're saying this. So give me that. And usually the actors, at least in this case, were able to go, that's what okay, cool. And then they would do it again, and I would say, yep, that's exactly it.
But I do think, especially coming from the theater world, sometimes, very, very, very few times, but sometimes a line reading is almost what's needed.
Agreed.
If they just can't get it.
Yeah. And I think some of that depends on the actor too, because some actors get really offended by being given line readings. When if I'm on stage and I'm doing a role, I'll just find at a certain point, I'm just like, just tell me how you want me to say it.
Exactly.
But I think there's a level of, I don't know if it's comfort or confidence or something that you almost have to be willing to say, yeah, just give me the line reading. Just tell me what you want. Just tell me how you want it to sound. But I was helping a professor at the university where I used to teach, who was auditioning for something. She was a theater professor, and I was kind of trying to give her notes, and she finally looked at me. She said, "Joe, just tell me how to say this line."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, cool, all right, I can do that." I was like, "I'm trying not to do that." She's like, "Yeah, I don't care. Just tell me. I was like,
After a while, beating around the bush just doesn't work. Now, switching gears just a little bit, through your production company, Court Street Productions,
yes, sir.
you've done some very good, actually Emmy-nominated documentaries.
Yes, Ohio Valley Regional Emmy. I should be clear.
Well,
I haven't gone to the big show yet.
you know, Emmy is an Emmy, right?
I wouldn't know because I don't have the trophy. I've been nominated. I didn't win.
Remember, it's just getting nominated, right?
It's right. Yes, I like to joke. I'm the Amy Adams of the Ohio Valley Emmys.
But the one that was nominated was called Epidemic Addiction in America. So obviously about a documentary about addiction in the Midwest and what people were going through. The one right before that, though, which I love, was called The Big Beer Doc about beer in Evansville and the history of beer in Evansville.
Yep.
When you look at those two, kind of, we'll say different subject matters.
Go ahead. You can say it.
No, I'm not going to bother. Do you go about making a documentary the same way with two such vastly different subject matters? Or do you have to really focus your mind in a different way for something that is much lighter than the other?
Right. Well, and the two of those were incredibly different in a lot of ways. One of them was very much a historical piece about the history of brewing in Evansville, Indiana, and all of the the breweries that had been here over the years, a lot of which are gone and some of which are not. So that historical approach is, to me, different from the sort of modern social issue approach. That documentary incidentally came out in the end of February of 2020. So probably not the public health issue that was going to draw a lot of attention at the Emmys that year.
I truly feel that the name is what hurt it more than anything, because we were during a pandemic.
It's true.
It took away a lot of that. I was actually thinking about that when I saw it first came out. I go, I bet this comes out a year prior that everyone talks about it.
That is entirely possible. But when I got to the Emmy nominations and I saw the names of the things like 2020, the year that revealed us, COVID, I was like, yeah, I am honored to be nominated. Just happy to be here. I'm happy to be at the party this year. But yeah, I mean, that one, it was a different approach because, I mean, both of them are fairly interview based. I mean, there's a lot of, but one of them, you're going back and you're getting historical footage and all of those things. And the other things, you're talking about people's life story, and you're talking to people's, you're not asking about, like, hey, when your dad worked at this brewery, you're saying, like, hey, tell me about, the time you overdosed. So, there's a lot more of that sort of very much more personal element to the documentary piece, to the social story, than there is to the others. I think you're approaching it a little more carefully. Not that you don't want to get everything right in both of them, but when you're dealing with people's stories, and especially people's stories that have that kind of struggle and that kind of trauma to them, you really want to get it right. It's really important that you honor that and that you were respectful to it and treat it in a different way. And that goes all the way into the facts and figures that you use. You want to get the right ones. You don't want to misrepresent something, because even if I'm not misrepresenting this person's individual story, I'm still misrepresenting something that has affected so many people. And that was really important to me on that one. And also it was kind of similar on the other one that I got an Emmy nomination for, which was From the Ashes, about the University of Evansville basketball team that died in a plane crash in 1977. So doing that piece and talking to parents about losing their kids and this thing that affected not just this community, though it did tremendously impact this community, but also so many other communities and so many other lives. You don't want to make a mistake there. You don't want to trivialize it. I didn't even want to think commercially. I remember being at a film festival and having a producer come up and tell me, like, if you want to sell this film, you're going to have to do this and this and this and this and take out these pieces. And I thought about that and I was like, I see where you're coming from and that makes sense to me. But I sat down with all these families and I told them how I was going to tell this story, and I told them how I was going to handle their children's story. And I don't think that it's the right thing for me to do, to go, yeah, I promised you that, but I can make more money doing this. Whereas with the beer doc, I might have felt okay about doing the more money thing.
It was a historical piece that would be used for a long time to tell the story of those families. So right. I very much understand that. Now, from a writing point, from a scripting point, for anybody out there that wants to get into documentary making, obviously you start with the research on anything that's documentary first.
Absolutely.
Which, for a research monkey like me, is fantastic. I have no problem with that. Do you then write a treatment before you do the interviews, hoping that it will go a certain way? Or do you get all the interviews and then write your treatment around that for the edit?
For me, it's always do the interviews first. The interviews come before the treatment for me, because to me, they're part of the research. Those interviews are a big part of the research. So, you do enough research beforehand that you walk into the interviews knowing what you're talking about. And especially on something like the addiction documentary, like you don't know what these people's stories are going to be. You don't know what you're going to find when you get out there. For the plane crash film, similar. I mean, like, you have a sense because you know what happened. But, I can't honestly say that I wrote a treatment for either of those projects. I got through the interviews and I went through all the footage and started to kind of map out in my head. And I might have had an outline, but to me, it was mapping out in my head, how does this story flow? Like, and it wasn't like, we're going to talk about this and then this and this. It was just like, how does the story, what's the trajectory that we're going to go through here to get from A to Z?
Mm-hmm.
And then making that exist in an edit. So to me, the treatment was probably a very vague outline that turned into the story got written in the edit.
Yeah, especially with documentary, you have to be ready to spend a lot of time in the edit.
Yes.
And a lot of time to get that right.
Yes. And as a one-man band on most of my documentaries, I've had people say, man, it takes you a really long time. It takes you a year to finish one of these things. I'm like, yes, that's fast. A year is fast when you're doing that by yourself, because it is. And From the Ashes had 42 hours worth of interviews for a 90-minute film. And you go through every minute of that, multiple times, and you separate it out and you kind of categorize everything. And then it becomes, okay, how do we go through and use those interviews to tell a story? And then, where are the gaps that we need to write narration for? And yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. I don't have the itch to do another one of those. The last one that I did, I aired at the end of 2023. The itch to do a documentary has not come back yet.
Now, you taught video production at the University of Evansville, correct?
I did.
Okay. Because you make documentaries and films yourself, what's one thing that you would tell your students to make their lives easier from your personal experience? Not just from the teaching side, but from your personal experience. What is one thing that you would tell your students, hey, this will make everything easier?
Prepare. Be organized. Make a shot list before you go to set. Make sure that, you've got your breakdown with your props and just be organized. And like everything about that day's shoot should be planned out, and then it just becomes about executing. And if I'm building the plane while I'm flying it on set, I'm wasting somebody's time. And that's not, and when you're on a low budget film and you're working with people who are, giving their time for significantly less than, if not nothing, then at least significantly less than it's probably worth. You don't want to waste their time. You want to show up. You want to be organized. You want to be professional. You want to be respectful. And yeah, so to me, it's about, you have to be planning. When you get there, you're executing. And that doesn't mean that you don't embrace that happy accident that happens or that shot that pops into your head, but you have time to do that shot now because you were prepared for everything else. And what we found on Wet Bulb was a lot of times we were, I don't want to say over-prepared. That first day, we definitely weren't. But, there are scenes in that film where we ended up cutting a significant amount from the shot list. I'd walk in with this long shot list. And if you think about, there's a sequence in the third chapter where Delia and Eric, it's kind of the quiet scene in the middle of all of the chaos, where Mark has just gone upstairs and Eric asked Delia, are you okay? And they end up just kind of like leaning on these chairs at the dining room table and having this conversation. I had this big ass shot list for that sequence. And, we did the intro, the opening shot to it, which kind of wraps around the two of them as they sit at the chairs, and it sort of wraps around and then stops. And they're both in frame. She's in focus, or he's in focus. She's out of focus in the foreground. And I just let it and keep running until they finally looked at me. They're like, are you going to cut? Because we weren't ready to keep going here. And I was like, because Jake was going to keep rapping. I'm like, no, stop right there. And we decided that and the reverse was the whole scene. Like, we didn't need any of the other things, because having the two of them in frame together, they were so good together. It felt so intimate and felt so right that we're like, you know what? Dump all of the rest of this. Just let these two have the scene. They don't need a director to get in their way. So there were times where we walk in over prepared, but that's much better, because then the actors are just happy because they're like, oh, we just have to do one more side and then we're done. We can send everybody home. And that happened a couple times, specifically with those two actors, honestly, because they were so natural together. There's a scene in the last sequence where he's outside and she slides underneath the railing and they have a conversation. And that scene also had a huge shot list. And like once they were standing next to each other on frame, I was like, no, we're done. I was like, Jake, do you think we need anything else? Because I don't think we do. He's like, nope, that was beautiful. So it's nice to have those moments and to have actors that can do that and that. But that would be the biggest piece of advice that I would give is just don't ever come in unprepared, because you will waste everybody's time. You'll waste your time. You won't get what you want, because filmmaking is very precise. And if you don't know what you want, you're not going to get what you're happy with.
And I think that goes on each side of the camera, because the actors need to be more or as much, if not more, prepared when they get there than the other side of the camera.
Yeah, and it's very different from stage as an actor, because as an actor on stage, you're going to build that character and that performance over the course of 2 or 3 months, right, of rehearsals and everything else, you know, and you're going to learn the lines as you go, and you're going to learn the blocking as you go, and you're going to start to find the character as you go, and you have all this time to discover that. Whereas on a film, you're going to show up on Tuesday night, you're going to do, you know, act 3, scene 5, you're going to run through it 4 or 5 or 6 times doing different angles, and then you're never going to do that scene again. Right. So you got to walk in knowing where you are in the script, where you are in your character's arc, and where their headspace is in that moment. Know your lines, you know, the obvious things, but also all of those things and how they fit into the puzzle. So yeah, that's so critical.
Well, you're never doing that scene again until the reshoot.
Right. Which again, if you're on a low budget indie film, it's probably never going to happen. Depends on the film.
Right. Now, one of my favorite questions to ask any writer that we have on here, because it's something that's always asked of me, is do you outline?
I have tried to outline. That outline lasts 5 to 10 pages most of the time before the story takes me somewhere that I wasn't expecting. And I just like to be open to that discovery. I like to be open to that. Like my first draft kind of is my outline. Because again, I'm not worrying about going back and fixing things. I'm just worried about getting to the words at the end, because you can go back and tinker and tweak and do all of those things, and you'll never find the end if you do that, because you'll just keep going back and keep going back and keep going back. And I think that first draft is really important to write until you find those words, until you find the end. And that to me has become the outline, because the discovery happens as you're discovering the character, as you're discovering where they go and what they do and what their journey is. I may have an ending in mind. I may have some scenes in mind or some kind of touch points that I think are going to happen. I've also had that happen where I think they're going to hit these touch points, and I get halfway through and I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense anymore because of what's happened in the story or what's happened with this character. So no, I have always been told I should outline. I was told in grad school that I should outline. I have always been told that I should outline, but it doesn't work for me. To me, it hampers the discovery process, and that's half the fun, and it's half of what makes something good, I think.
Well, Joe, this has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. Tell the people where they can find you online.
You can find me online. I have a Facebook page. I'm Joe Atkinson. I'm terrible at keeping it up and being, because I'm just not interested in social media most of the time. You can also find me on Instagram, Joe W. Atkinson, or at Joe W. Atkinson. That's probably where you'll find the most sort of regular updates from me, especially when it comes into time to start making another film. That's where I try and keep all of that work. You will also see that I have a very dad Facebook page and Instagram page. It's 100% somebody's dad on it. So I've been told before, like, you are very dadcore on your social media.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I'm good with it. I'm good with it. I don't know if my kids are good with it, but I'm good with it. So, you know.
Well, you're the adult, so who cares?
They're getting a lot closer than I'm comfortable with to joining me there, but you know. But yeah, you can find me in those places, and hopefully you'll be able to see Wet Bulb before too long. We have played in 3 film festivals, at one Best Feature at 2 of them, which is pretty cool, and Best Director at 1 of them. And just got another one that I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but we have one more film festival coming up, and then hopefully distribution.
And see, you won Best Director at 1. That's better than winning an Emmy.
Or a regional Emmy. All of the above, right?
See? So
I didn't get it.
Good to go.
I don't think I got a trophy. I think I just got like a little certificate, but still, it's good.
It hangs on the wall just as well.
Right, exactly. It looks great on the wall.
There you go.
Yes.
Joe, thank you so much for coming on the Working Writer Podcast, and thank you for all the great advice that you just gave to a lot of writers. Best of luck in the future, and everybody out there, when Wet Bulb does come out, the full name of it, of course, is Wet Bulb Temperature. When you do see it, that it does come out, you have to see it. It's a beautifully shot film, beautifully written, beautifully directed, and there's some actors in it too. So
thank you, Brad. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for the opportunity to be on your podcast. I had a great time.
All right, Dave, I still think there's something hinky going on in Evansville, and I am here to start the conspiracy theory. Now, you lived in Evansville.
Several times.
Should I be worried? I mean,
I would.
is there something post-apocalyptic going on down there that Joe is actually covering up?
I don't think. I think the water's just tainted. I think that's what it is. I don't think it's like post-apocalyptic as much as like the water from the Ohio River is just tainted.
Huh? Okay.
But it's yeah, it's interesting. I've actually lived in Evansville 3 separate times in my life, and I'm hoping never to go back.
Well, there you go. There you go. I've seen professional wrestling down there, and isn't there a Starlight distillery down there? I think
so. Yeah.
Yeah, a distillery down there that we visited when we came down to see you. So yeah.
Which going on the topic, I totally forgot. He did that beer documentary, which was a lot of fun because I did not. I worked with him on the Evansville Aces one, and I shot some B-roll footage for him for the Epidemic one, but I didn't work on the beer doc. But I remember him when he started doing that. It was after coming off the plane crash documentary for the what was it called, From the Ashes, about the Evansville basketball team that died in a plane crash. And I remember what a toll that took on him, like emotionally. And he's just like, I need to do something. And then he did the beer doc, which was like fun and peppy and was really cool. And then he went back to do something darker, and he's just like, oh, nope. So it is. Those documentaries are really trying on you mentally, because it's not just stuff you're writing. These are real people, real stories.
Yeah. Well, it was great talking to Joe. I hope everybody took notes, because there were a lot of great learning phases in there. But I want to thank Joe Atkinson so much for sitting down with us to talk to us. Remember to go out and visit him on his social media, and write to us at the Working Writer Podcast at gmail.com. And please give us a rating, leave a review of this podcast, whatever outlet you're listening on or watching on YouTube. We want to hear from you. We really do. So follow us on our Facebook page as well. Until next week, make the most of your time and keep writing. Remember, writing is more than just a job. It is a passion. Pay your bills, but follow your passion. So until next time, get to writing.